In this lecture, we are going to introduce functions. So I'm going to click on text. I will move it here and let me double click on it. So I'll put two hashtags, put a bool, and let's see. Functions. Okay, here we go. So I want to start by defining. So this is one of the most important lessons because we are going to be using functions a lot. Functions just helps you save time. So it's a skill to master if you really want to be really good at data analysis. So let's start with simple function. What you do is you always start with def, then you give any name you want. Just make sure you give a name that makes sense. And after you give the name, you have to put these two brackets around, and you have your period, and then you define what it does. So the convention generally is just to always state what your function does. So I'll put it between three of these things. So I'll simply say this function prints. You don't have to, but it's a good idea to put there. It's a comment within your function what it does. So this function prints a simple greeting, so that when you come back a year later, you know what the function does. You don't have to start guessing. Generally, this is called a doc string. Why does it matter? Generally, you can use it to generate, how will I say? Okay, let me not say the wrong thing here. Let's just move on. So once you've done that, you can now present your function. So this function will just print a simple greeting, and it will be hello from this simple function. That's all. So whenever you call that function, that's what it's going to generate. So how do you call a function? Whatever you have here is what you use to call a function. So the name of the function is greet, and you put the brackets. If you hit run enter, you can see greet. If you do it again, you still have it. So that's just what the function does. Pretty simple. Let's make it more interesting now. So we will continue with greeting. Now we want to look at functions with parameters. So you can input value. It doesn't just say hello from this simple function. It will be maybe hello Bob Marley or hello Peter Touch from this simple function, depending on the name you give it. So you'll be able to provide parameters. So I'll call this greet function, and here we will put a default thing called name, so that when you enter any name, it's able to understand what you're trying to do. So there we go. So I will simply put the comments, and we will state what the function does. So this function creates a person by their name. And here we go. So we will simply do print. Okay, this time we can use the F to make it interesting. So hello, whoever we want. So we'll say name, from this simple function. Oh, let's stop that nonsense. Hello, how are you doing? Yeah, this is better. Now, how do we call this? How do we call this function? Remember, we always have to use what we have here. This is the name of the function, so we call it with that, but this time we will enter one parameter, which is the name. So for example, here we can say greet and in here we will enter a name. Let's say Alice. And hello Alice, how are you doing? If you do the same here, greet function, and you choose to enter, let's say Bob Marley. Hello Bob Marley, how are you doing? So this is just a simple function with a simple parameter. Now let's start looking at functions with multiple parameters. So function with multiple parameters. Now just note there are other things in Python that can be taught, but I focus just on the ones you will need to be really good at analyzing data, at really becoming good at data analysis. So let's start with def. I'll say add numbers. And here I'll just put two generic things, which means whenever you put these two numbers, it's going to add them. We put column, and then you can now go on with your comment. So here we'll say this function adds two numbers and prints the result, so that when you come a year from today, you know exactly what the function does. So we will use the print function, and of course f, so we'll say the sum of curly braces x and y is okay a result. Now before we do that, we need to define that. So I'll just, let me go to the end of that, and I'll say result. I define a variable, and within it I'll say x plus y. So once you enter it, it's going to compute the result. Then you can have whatever you want there, and that's the fun of it. So now let's go and call this function. So we have add numbers, and we get to enter two parameters. So if we say 5 and 3, what do we have? The sum of 5 and 3 is that. However, let's try another one. Add numbers 100, 200, and there we go, it's 300. So our function is working really well. Now let's have a function with a return value. You will see what that means. Function, so it won't just print, we will not be using print, but we will use return. Function with a return value. So as usual, we start with def to define it, then we give we basically give the name, so it's going to be multiply numbers, and here we'll have x. Now you can also try adding a third number. Okay, it's going to still work. You can add z there, you add z everywhere. You can add a third number. It's the same principle. If we are using 2, we can still use as many as we want. Okay, that's the name we've given. What does it do? This function multiplies 2 numbers and returns the result. Now, here we go. Now we don't need to say result and then we print it. We'll just use return. So it's going to return x multiplied by y. Now multiplication is a star. And that is it. So here, for example, we can simply run. Let's just put it here. Let me run something like multiply numbers. Let's say 2, 4, and I run it. You can see we have 8. It has outputted 8. Now the interesting thing is that you can actually use the return value. You can store it somewhere. You can say, for example, product is multiply numbers. Let's say 3, 7. So it's going to do 3 multiplied by 7, and then it's going to store it here. Then if we want, we can print product. And we have 21. So you can store it and use it for other things. Actually, you can use it in a different way. You can actually say multiply numbers. So I can say 3 times 7 plus 9. We expect 30. Okay, let's even store it here. So let me just call this df, and at the end we want to see what df is. We run it, you see we have 30. So it just gives us a bit more flexibility. Now we want to look at a function with a default parameter. Function with default parameter, such that if you do not enter, it's going to use the default. As usual, we start with def, and we can say describe pet. So here you want to describe your pet. So now let's enter something, animal type. So what type of animal are you talking about? And then we now want pet name. This is where we will enter the default. And how do you put the default? You just put equal, and in between your quotes, I'll call it Medor, which is the name of a dog. And then time for us to describe it. So it displays information about a pet. And here we go, print. So we'll not be using return here. Return here, we'll use print. Here we go. Yeah, print. I have a animal type. So if it's a dog, you'll just say I have a dog, and we'll put a period here. Go to the next line, we have another print, and then we will now give the pet's name. Here we mention pet's name, so here we want to give the pet's name. So my animal type is, or you can say name is. You now give pet name, and we put a period here. Then we can go now and we say describe pet to call the function. So the first time, okay, I'll just do both. I'll say dog. It is a dog, and the name is Blake. Okay, so let's run it and see what we get. I have a dog. My dog's name is Blake. Now we want to run it now without. So I'll say describe. I'll still say dog, and that's all. So once I give only one, I have a dog. My dog's name is Meadow. So it's going to use that every time you do not enter something. For the second space, it's going to use the default. We are going to do a brief introduction to what we call lambda functions. So lambda functions, we will be using it a lot. It's extremely important for you to fully understand what a lambda function is. So if you are looking at regular functions, let's say for example def, and we decide to create a function that adds, let's say it's going to add x and y. We had an example. Okay, to save time, we will not be entering certain things. Now, I think I will have a mistake if I run this because it did not start there. So you have to always make sure your things are quite aligned at the beginning. If it's a bit like that, you will have an error. So let me hit enter, and there we go. I want to return x plus y. So if I decide to run this function, let's say I say add 2, 3, and I run it, I have 5. Now, we don't need to write it like that if we decide to use a lambda function. So if I decide to write add lambda, so lambda function will help you not to define all of this. You just, if it's something you'd, so if I need to be using this all the time, it's better to write your normal function. But if it's a one-time thing, you don't need to write the function, you just need to use the lambda approach. So for that, you write lambda. What do you want to do? We want to add x and y, and we will say x plus y. So that's just it. If you do that, it's going to do the magic for you. And we are going to do exactly what we did for the regular function. In this case, I'll just say add lambda, and I'll repeat 2 plus 2, 3, run it, and you see it has done the same thing. But you don't need all these things. You are just on the same line, and it gives that to you instantaneously. Now let's try another one. Let's say we want a square, and we say lambda. So it's going to be x and x. So it's just going to be x because it's just the same thing. We are not having two distinct things. So what do I want to do for that x? I want to say x multiplied by x. And I will say square. What do I want to square? Let's say you want to square 4. You expect to have 16. And that's it. Else you have to rewrite all of this and then so this just makes life easy. Play a bit with it. We will revisit it and do justice with it later on. Python has some libraries which are a bit like functions that have already been written, and we can call the libraries and use the and access the functions which were written so that we don't need to try to recreate the wheel from scratch. There are times when you don't really need to rewrite some of these things because it was already written using the best algorithms. So you just use the functions others have written. For example, we have the math library, and I'm going to use import math. It's going to import the math library. Let me just run it. You see it has imported it, so it's giving us access to the different functions which are hidden in that library. For example, if I say math dot square root, so I want to calculate the square root, it's simply st. So at times you just need to know what are the different functions which are there. If I want to calculate the square root of 16, once I do that and I run it, this is the square root. It has been given to me. So if I want, for example, to know pi, math.pi, and I just run it, it gives me the number pi. Let's say I want the factorial, math.factorial, factorial of what? Let's say the factorial of 5. So it's just 120. Now, what is 120? Let me not get into factorial. It's not part of the course. This is it for this session. In the next session, the third session, we will start using some of the things we covered in session 1 and 2, especially session 1. So we will be using lists, and we will be using dictionaries to be able to convert the lists into series in Panda and to convert the dictionaries into data frames in Panda. Most of the data, I will say at least 80% of the data you will analyze will be in the form of data frames. So we will play with it in the next session. Have fun, and I'll see you in the next session.